I try to get rationality into what I'm doing. I did an intro to science. I did some episodes on climate change and evolution and vaccines and GMOs. And then I did one on how glyphosate doesn't appear to be a human carcinogen. And maybe Monsanto is not the devil incarnate. And I basically lost half my audience. And it's like, oh. I hear you've provided some information on GMOs, so my advice is maybe don't look too deeply into glyphosate.
Yeah, I narrated a documentary about GMOs, and I didn't create the documentary, but I sort of approved its content and made some suggestions. But it was primarily the work of a documentarian named Scott Kennedy, who is he's got, he's left-leaning in his worldview and his outlook, but he noticed that there are certain postures that people on the left take that is not founded in either rational thinking or science, and it's very, it serves a worldview that is not itself entirely based in science. And that's a curious fact because the left commonly criticizes the right for being anti-science, primarily citing, justifiably, the denial of human-caused climate change. And that, of course, poses existential threats. So that's science denial on a very extreme level that has global consequences. A lot of the science denial that existed on the left is affected just the individual. If you choose not to buy GMO, okay, but if you do things that then have global consequences, and by the way, the first anti-vaxxers were people on the left. It only worked its way into, and their reasons were because they were anti-pharma and anti sort of some mainstream science related to it. And then the right became anti-vax out of freedom, and this is America, and so there they meet on the other side of the fence, and now they account for nearly a fourth of all of the country that's not vaccinated. So anyhow, the GMO. There's an interesting fact about glyphosate. If you look at, about LD50, it's a ranking of lethality of a substance that you might ingest, and you can create this scale for practically anything that's ingestible. It wouldn't even have to be food.
Lowest dose to kill half of a test subpopulation.
Correct. So it's a lowest dose per kilogram of body weight, where if you, no, not lowest dose, lethal dose. So so the way that works is they do this with mice, of course, which have sufficiently similar DNA to humans, although humans don't want to admit that, that there's so much correspondence to what happens to them relative to us. They get cancer, they get obesity, they get addicted. There's a lot of similar things. So they do this on mice, and you give them an ever-increasing dose until you see that half of them die. And so that's an LD50. So the lethal dose for glyphosate is higher than the lethal dose for salt.
Yes.
So, in other words, a higher lethal dose means it's less lethal to you. You can take more of it before you die, right? And so, when I communicate with the public, I just try to put this kind of information out there, and then let them decide on their own. And it's hard because people get very, the heels get dug in because they believe something to be true. And then they cherry pick this. So you know this. With a podcast named Rationality, this is the center point to everything you talk about. You believe, you have a worldview, and then you cherry pick information to support that worldview, and then you're content in how you go about life for having done so.
I agree with your observation as well that there's, anti-science on both sides of the political spectrum. This is not a monopoly of the right. There's anti-science just as strongly on the left, and at the extremes especially, where worldview seems to trump facts and evidence.
Yeah, I would say it
Both of
slightly
them have bad
differently,
things.
only just to be precise. Because if you tell someone that they are something and they don't believe they're that, then you're not reaching them at all. So no liberal will say, I am anti-science. What is true is for them to hold the beliefs they do, they must reject some or all mainstream science on that subject. They have to reject it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've had this conversation, often the reply was, well, I reject it because the farmer is only into big money, and that's why I reject it. So they sort of justify it on the claim that they've done the research, and they're saying that the science that says they're wrong is what's wrong, thereby being able to sustain their view. And in the limit, you get conspiracy theories.
Yes, exactly. The Rational View is a weekly series hosted by me, Dr. Alan Scott, providing a rational, evidence-based perspective on important societal issues.